Alright, so let's do the same thing with a few other angles. So we're still trying to find all 6 trig functions of, this time we're using negative 5 pi over 4. Alright, so if we take a look at our unit circle, we don't have any negative angles on our unit circle. What negative angle means is instead of going the forward direction, we're going in the backwards direction. Alright, so there are a couple ways to think about this. Alright, so here is positive 5 pi over 4. That means we need to go all the way around until we get to the middle of the third quadrant for positive 5 pi over 4. Well, if we want to do negative, we need to go all the way around until we get to the middle of the third quadrant, counting this way. So negative 5 pi over 4 is actually coterminal to 3 pi over 4. So let's talk about how we would figure that out without just using the unit circle. Alright, so our issue is negative 5 pi over 4 is not in the unit circle. However, it is coterminal with 3 pi over 4. And how do we figure that out? Well, we just want to find a positive coterminal angle to this. So we can have our negative 5 pi over 4, and if we add 2 pi to that, let's see what that gives us. So negative 5 pi plus 8 pi is 3 pi. 3 pi over 4. So that means we need to look at 3 pi over 4 on the unit circle. Alright, so when we're finding our trig functions like sine of negative 5 pi over 4, we're actually going to be looking for a sine of 3 pi over 4 because that will give us the same trig function value. That's why it's important to know coterminal angles. Alright, so we're looking here at 3 pi over 4. Did I write that correctly? Yes. 3 pi over 4 is right here. So we're looking at this point here. Alright, so sine of 3 pi over 4, that's our y value, root 2 over 2. Okay. Now let's find cosine of negative 5 pi over 4. Again, we are still looking at 3 pi over 4 to do this. The x value is negative root 2 over 2. Alright, let's go with tangent. Negative 5 pi over 4. Well, that is sine over cosine. One of these should be negative, cosine is negative. So we're dividing something by itself. Alright, well that should be negative 1. Cosecant of 5 pi over 4, well that's just the reciprocal of sine of negative 5 pi over 4. So 2 over root 2. I'm going to rationalize it. Simplify. 2 divided by 2 is just 1. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with secant. It's the reciprocal of cosine, so negative 2 over root 2. We know exactly what that's going to be. It's going to look just like this one, negative root 2. And then finally, cotangent. It's the reciprocal of tangent, so also negative 1. Okay. All right, let's do another one. Let's do pi. So this time our angle is pi, so we're looking for pi on our unit circle. Here it is. That means we need to use this point, -1 and 0. Okay. All right, so let us find sine of pi. All right, so we're looking for our y value. So sine of pi is 0. Cosine of pi, that would be our x value. That's our -1. Tangent is a sine over cosine. 0 over anything is just 0. Secant is the reciprocal of sine. So we'll have to do 1 over 0. Is there any issue with having 1 over 0? Yes, there is. This is actually undefined. So secant of pi is undefined. So secant is undefined at x equals pi, or at theta equals pi. All right, let's do another one. That was cosecant. Let's do secant of theta. That's the reciprocal of cosine. And then cotangent, reciprocal of tangent. That would be that -1 over 0, which is also undefined. All right, so sometimes we will not get actual values for our trig functions, and we'll talk about why and why not in a moment. All right, last one, 5 pi over 2. So we have to determine, is 5 pi over 2 on our unit circle? It is not, because 2 pi is the biggest number on our unit circle, and if we divide 5 divided by 2, that's bigger than 2. So this number is bigger than 2 pi. So that means we need to find its coterminal angle. Right? So let's see, we want to figure out what it is coterminal to, or with. So we'll have to do 5 pi over 2 and subtract, because we're too big right now. All right, 5 minus 4 is 1, so we got pi over 2 is our angle that we're using. All right, so when we're using our unit circle, we can't get to 5 pi over 2 because 5 pi over 2 is actually this, going around once and then up here. And that's close, that is coterminal to pi over 2. So we're going to use pi over 2, and we're using this 0.01. Okay, so let's do sine of 5 pi over 2. All right, so we're looking here. We need our y value. Cosine of 5 pi over 2. That's our x value. Tangent of 5 pi over 2. Sine over cosine. Problem, can't divide by 0, it's undefined. All right, let's look at the other three. Cosecant of 5 pi over 2, well, that's the reciprocal. So that's 1. Secant of 5 pi over 2, reciprocal of this. is undefined. Then cotangent of 5 pi over 2, that would be 0 over 1, which is 0.